How are you? It's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL. A couple of months ago, I was at my mother's house, and we were sitting down, and we were talking about whatever. She's got a nice studio downstairs. She's a fine artist herself, an oil painter, and I was sitting down in her studio, and we were chatting about whatever. And I was shooting my mouth off about whatever it is I was shooting my mouth off about. Too caught up in my own dialogue to really be paying attention to much else, because you know men, we can only focus on one thing at a time. Extremely well, but only one at a time. Don't push us. So I'm sitting there and I'm yap, and my mother the whole time is just being agreeable with me. Oh, really? Oh, that's wonderful. Ooh, that must have hurt. Really? He did what? Oh, no, that's not fair. And just kind of humoring me. But I, of course, was completely oblivious to the fact. Now, the whole time I'm talking, the whole time she's smiling and nodding, she walked over to one drawer and she pulled out a tube of paint and she grabs a palette and she puts it down next to me and she just squirts some blue on it, and then she goes and she grabs another one and puts a little dab of red and goes into white and yellow. There's about 5 or 6 colors there. And she's still yesing and yawing. I'm not paying attention. And then she goes and she gets some turpentine and she put it down next to me. And she goes, "Could you hold on to this? Just hold on to this for a sec." And I go, "Yeah." And she puts a brush into my hand, and then she gets one of those little pre-made canvases, right? And she puts it down, and I'm talking, and while I'm talking, she says, "Yeah, okay, well, go ahead and you can do whatever you want with that. Just mix these 2 colors together." I'm just like, "Yeah, okay." And I'm mixing them, and while I'm talking, I'm painting, like, half not paying attention, right? So I'm sitting there and just painting, doing my own thing. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes of this, I start to lose track of what I was talking about, and my concentration on the painting started to take over. And my mother just keeps doing stuff around the house, and then she eventually just walks upstairs and leaves me there. She comes back an hour later, and behold, there's a painting sitting in front of me, right? She basically wanted to get me to, she got frustrated with me that I did all my digital stuff all the time, and she tried to teach me an important lesson. One which at the time, well, it worked, quite frankly, because it reminded me of something extremely important when it comes to painting. As digital painters in this new age of art, we have been blessed with advantages that just simply didn't exist. Advantages which, I might add, I completely love. My entire career is based off of these advantages. My online school, my freelance work, my ability to work efficiently and ship my work anywhere around the world instantaneously and get paid instantaneously. All of these different things are extremely amazing advantages, which I've built my career around, which many people do, which most people are these days. My ability to work in Photoshop and all of these amazing tools I have at my disposal, these millions and millions of colors I have at my fingertips for the cost of an application, a computer, and an internet connection. That's it. I don't have to go to the store. I don't have to buy or stretch my own canvases. I don't have to buy gesso. I don't have to buy my expensive oil paints. I don't have to go and buy expensive brushes. I've got everything at my fingertips. And I have access to all of that stuff. And what my mother reminded me of that day, sitting down in her studio, and the whole point of her doing that to me, in a very sneaky way, I might add, but that's my mom for you. She's very sneaky that way. What she was reminding me of is the fact that we don't need any of that. We don't need it to make great art. In fact, in many ways, I mean, we do need it to a certain degree to fulfill certain types of careers. I need it to do my type of work. And yes, I'm very efficient at working, but we don't need it to be great artists. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? We don't need it. In fact, in many ways, it's a bit of a curse, especially for those who have never experienced or have little experience in traditional art and traditional painting. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it this way. Think about the movie V for Vendetta. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, okay? But in the movie, there's a certain scene in the movie where where you don't realize this at the time, but that the girl, the star of the film, gets arrested and thrown into a prison. She gets thrown into a kind of a dungeon cell where she's shaved and starved and neglected. And she's left with absolutely nothing but the rags on her back and the four walls. And then at one point, she finds a letter. And in that letter is a story about a woman telling her own story about how she, her and her lover ended up getting arrested and how they got pulled apart and this whole tragedy. And they start writing back and forth. And the only thing she has in this rock cell, in this damp, dark prison, is one writing utensil and a piece of paper to write notes back and forth. And with little means she has, she finds hope, she finds connection, she finds emotion, she finds all of these things. And she clings on to this with this one thing. She learns to make the best with what she has, with what limited means she has. Now, if we put that in the context of art, and furthermore put this in the context of oil painting, I was recently watching a YouTube video, I can't remember who by, but it's a fantastic, when I find out, I'll link it in the description below, okay? It is a YouTube channel dedicated to traditional oil painting, and a very good one, I might add. I really like this guy. And in it, he's talking about a limited palette of color, essentially. And he makes reference to Caravaggio's work. And Caravaggio was very well known for painting thousands of masterful paintings using what they believed was a palette of maybe 4 or 5 colors maximum. And he mixed only those colors together to create a full range of colors and creating hundreds of paintings. Now, when he died, they rummaged through his studio and did find many more colors in his repertoire. But that doesn't account for the fact that many of these paintings were produced using a very limited palette. All right? Now, that's extremely important for us digital painters to hear, and to hear well. Because one of the biggest curses as a digital painter, which is disguised as a blessing, is the fact that we have at our fingertips access to countless tools, billions of colors, and the ability to backtrack anytime we want. We've got Control Z, we can work on different layers, we can transform, skew, we can do things, we can edit our work in ways that would normally take us days in traditional art, or weeks or months, depending on how bad our blunder was. And we can do that in a matter of seconds. We can select our background and change the color of it at our whim. But at the same time, the number one thing that I hear from my students, when I ask my students, which week of our mentorship scares you the most? They say color. Everybody fears color. Everybody fears color. Why? Because in their head, and in many artists' head, it is such an incredibly difficult subject to make sense of. Why? Color is partially intuitive. It is partially technical. It's subjective. It depends on the taste of that particular artist. It depends on the time of day. It depends on moods. It is such a wishy-washy, open-ended subject that so many people have a hard time buckling down and finding an intuitive, concrete way of working with color. And this works against you. This isn't an advantage. This is a disadvantage. If we think about the movie V for Vendetta, for instance, had somebody given her 6,000 pencils of different colors and, and 40 different books and 60 different surfaces to work on, she never would have ever discovered or gotten involved in that story with that other woman, because she would have had too many options at her disposal. And you give somebody too many options, and they won't know their ass from their elbow. They'll get so lost in options that they will lose sight of the fundamentals of life, of hope, of color, of art. And in every single case where I'm approached by students, or in every single case where I find myself getting carried away in narrative, getting carried away in color, and start to lose grips with my painting, it's always in limiting myself that I find my solution. That gets me over those difficult humps. Instead of sitting there go, how am I going to harmonize 6 colors? If I actually sat back and thought about that for a second, I would say, well, who the hell can harmonize 6 colors? That's extremely difficult to do. Try harmonizing 2. When you realize what a challenge it is to get a nice harmony with 2, try 3, and then you start going, woo, now we're starting to get hardcore. Then when you realize when you try to harmonize 6 or furthermore 20 colors in a single painting, and it's not working, and you're stressed, well, the problem is the fact that you're trying to do it with 20 colors. Try to harmonize 1 color. Try to make an entire painting out of 1 color. That's it. A monochromatic painting, where the only options you have are to play with saturation and value. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's all. And push that as far as you can. That's your single piece of paper. That's your single letter. That's your single pencil. That's it. And just work with that and see how far you can push it. When you realize that, when you connect yourself with working with limitations, the idea of adding to that and building on that and expanding on that to more options is something that you're going to do with a lot more care and a lot more specificity. You're going to do this in a very specific fashion. You're not just going to jump into it. The same thing applies to values. The same thing applies to composition. The same thing applies to drawing and line and construction. Keep it simple. Keep it limited. The curse of digital painting is the fact that you have too many options. So if you feel yourself stuck with your paintings, if you feel yourself getting caught up in the layer monster where you have 6,000 layers because you might at some point need to change the color of that leaf on that tree over there and you want to make sure it's isolated to save yourself some time. Instead, practice doing everything on a single layer with a single brush using 3 values or 2 if you can manage that, with a maximum of 2 colors, and see how far you can push that. And what you'll immediately start to realize, you can create an entire painting and eliminate the endless options and focus on creating art. All right, so hopefully this helps. Hopefully this will help you get over any blocks. I know whenever I get stuck with my own paintings, by limiting myself, that's 99% of the time how I get myself over those hurdles. And hopefully that'll do the same thing for you. Remember, as well, before we close up shop, I still have a few spots available for my mentorship, so feel free to get in touch with me. Again, I leave all the information in the description below. And if you can, it would be a huge help if you also like and subscribe. Thanks again. Take care.